You know that scene? It's in, like, every single spy movie.
Yeah.
The hero runs up to a locked door, bad guys are right behind them, and they pull a bobby pin out of their hair. Jiggle, jiggle.
2 seconds later, click, they're in.
Exactly. It looks so effortless. But after digging through this huge stack of research we have, I'm talking the MIT Guide to Lockpicking, police manuals, even a Trends for 2025 report, that whole scene is, well, it's a lie.
It's a total fantasy.
But the reality is actually way more interesting. It's not magic. It's a battle of physics, of, manufacturing tolerances and engineering.
It really is. A lock isn't just this thing you buy at a hardware store. It's a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
And for a business, it's the architecture of your security.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you protect your assets, your data, your people, especially in a massive city like Los Angeles.
Right. And that is exactly what we're unpacking in today's deep dive. We're going to get into how locks work, but more importantly, why they fail. We're talking about the binding defect, the physics of brute force, all of it.
We've got a lot to cover. We're going from microscopic details inside a pin pumbler all the way to AI and biometrics. The trade is really shifting from heavy metal to high tech.
But before we crack that safe, so to speak, we have to mention our partner for this deep dive. If you're listening to this in Los Angeles, you know how critical security is. For a 5-star service, you want to call West Point Locksmith. Whether you're a business needing a full access control system or you're just locked out of your office at 2 in the morning, these are the people to call. The number is 310-295-4040. They're fast, reliable, and available 24/7.
Honestly, just having a number like that saved in your phone is part of a good security plan. You don't want to be scrambling when there's an emergency.
So true. Okay, let's get into the mechanics. I think most people have like a vague idea of how a key works. It goes in, pushes some pins up, and the lock turns.
Right, the basics.
But the MIT Guide had this concept, the flatland model. It completely changed how I see it.
It's such a great way to visualize it. It simplifies the 3D chaos inside the lock. So imagine 2 thick metal plates, one on top of the other.
Okay.
You want to slide the bottom plate, that's the plug, the part that turns, but you can't. And you can't, because there are these little pins running vertically through holes drilled in both plates.
So the pins are basically stitching the 2 plates together, blocking the movement.
Exactly. And inside those holes, you actually have a stack, a key pin on the bottom that touches your key, and a driver pin on top with a spring pushing it down.
And the key's job is just to lift that whole stack up.
Precisely. You want to lift it so the gap between the key pin and the driver pin lines up perfectly with the gap between the 2 metal plates.
That's the shear line.
That's the shear line. When all the gaps line up there, nothing is blocking the plug, and it turns.
Okay, that makes sense for a key. But here's the part that, this was the real aha moment for me. The MIT Guide says locks can only be picked because they're broken.
Broken is maybe a strong word, but yeah, essentially. Security relies on what we call manufacturing defects. The Guide calls it the binding defect.
Explain that, because if I buy a high-end commercial lock, I'm assuming it's perfect.
But nothing is perfect. When a factory drills those pinholes, they can't get them in a perfectly straight line. We're talking microscopic differences. Hole number 1 might be a fraction of a millimeter off. Hole 3 might be a tiny bit to the right.
Okay, so the holes aren't in a perfect row.
Correct. So now imagine you stick a tension wrench in there and try to turn the lock without a key. You apply a little torque.
Right.
Because the holes are misaligned, the plug is going to hit the one pin that's furthest off center first.
It's like a bunch of people trying to get through a doorway at once. One person is going to hit the door frame first.
Exactly that. That one pin binds. It gets pinched between the plug and the outer casing. And because it's pinched, you can use a pick to lift it, and the friction will hold it in place. It gets stuck at the shear line.
Ah, so it doesn't fall back down.
That doesn't fall back down. Then the plug turns a tiny, tiny bit more, and now the next most misaligned pin binds.
You're just finding the errors one by one.
You got it. You are literally hunting for the manufacturing defects until all the pins are set. Then you hear that click.
That is just wild. So a cheap lock has looser tolerances, more slop, which makes it easier to pick.
Much easier. And a high-security commercial lock, the kind you put on your business, has incredibly tight tolerances. It's so precise, it's nearly impossible to feel which pin is binding.
So that's finesse. But the sources also talk about the brute force stuff, like raking and scrubbing.
Raking is. It's less precision, more probability. You just jam a jagged tool in there, scrub it back and forth really fast while applying tension.
And you're just hoping the pins bounce into place by luck.
Pretty much. It works surprisingly well on cheap residential locks, but it won't get you far with proper commercial hardware.
The one that sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie was the pick gun. The police guide mentions Newton's laws.
Yes. Think of a Newton's cradle on a desk, the little clicky balls. Or think of a pool table. You hit the cue ball into another ball, what happens?
The first ball stops, but the second one shoots off.
Conservation of momentum. A pick gun has this little needle that snaps upward with a lot of force. It hits the bottom key pins. They don't move much, but they transfer all that energy to the top driver pins.
And the top pins go flying up past the shear line.
For a split second, yes, they're just floating up against the springs, and in that tiny window you can turn the plug.
Which brings us back to the business side. If I'm a business owner in LA protecting thousands of dollars of inventory, I don't want a lock that can be beaten by a billiard ball trick.
Precisely. That's why you need high-security cylinders. They have special features, sidebars, telescoping pins that are designed to resist those specific physical attacks. You're buying resistance. You're buying time.
It's not just about keeping people out, though. It's about controlling who gets in. This is where my brain started to hurt a little. Master keys? I always thought it was some kind of magic skeleton key, but the Foxtrot training manual says no, it's not magic.
It's not magic. It's just more complicated inside. To make one lock open with two different keys, say an employee's key and the owner's master key, you have to create two shear lines inside the same lock.
Two? How do you even do that?
You add extra pins called wafers. They're these tiny little metal discs that go in the pin stack. So now you have two different heights that work. One for the employee key, one for the master key.
Wait a second. If you're adding more breakpoints, doesn't that make the lock easier to pick?
It does. That is the fundamental trade-off. Convenience versus security. Every wafer you add creates another potential vulnerability.
So a master keyed lock is inherently a little less secure.
Generally speaking, yes. And that's why a business owner should never try to DIY this. If you don't calculate the pinning chart correctly, you can create what's called a ghost key.
A ghost key. That sounds bad.
It is. It's where a totally random key cut, maybe even a blank, just happens to line up with all those extra wafers and opens the door. Or worse, the janitor's key accidentally opens the server room.
What a nightmare scenario.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need a professional to map out the whole system. It's a logic puzzle to make sure the hierarchy works without creating a massive security hole.
Speaking of server rooms, let's talk about where this is all going. That Locksmith Trends 2025 report was pretty eye-opening. We are moving way beyond metal keys.
Oh, absolutely. The big shift is from key-to-like to keyless. We're seeing a huge jump in biometrics. Fingerprints, facial recognition. It's not sci-fi anymore. It's becoming standard.
But the real game changer for businesses is the data, right? The audit trail.
That's it. A metal key is dumb. It has no memory. If someone uses a key at midnight and steals something, you have no record of who it was.
Right.
With a smart system, you know who opened the door and when. It's the difference between passive protection and active monitoring.
But then you get into the other side of it, IoT and cybersecurity. The report said locksmiths are becoming IT security partners.
They have to be. If your lock connects to the Wi-Fi, it can be hacked. So now, security isn't just about the deadbolt, it's about firmware updates.
That is a massive shift. You have to worry about wafers and shear lines and now firmware.
It's a lot to manage on your own.
Which is a perfect time to mention West Point Locksmith again. Look, setting up a complex master key system or integrating smart locks into your network, that is not a weekend DIY project.
Not at all.
You don't want to mess that up. West Point Locksmith in Los Angeles specializes in these commercial solutions. They have 5-star reviews for a reason. Give them a call at 310-295-4040. They give you peace of mind.
It's about reliability. You're paying for the expertise, not just the lock.
Yeah, let's talk about that because there's a real cost difference between a pro and, a handyman. This old house source made a distinction I think a lot of people miss. Replacing versus rekeying.
Yes. This is the most common confusion.
Okay.
Somebody loses a key and they panic. They think, oh no, I have to buy all new locks for the whole building.
Which is expensive. You're buying all new hardware.
And it takes time. But a pro could do something called rekeying. They just take the existing lock cylinder apart, dump out the old pins, and put in a new set of pins that match a new key.
So you keep the same doorknob, the same deadbolt, but the old key is now worthless.
Exactly. You're changing the password, not the computer. It is so much cheaper and faster.
But what if you are locked out? The Foxtrot manual had these really specific diagrams about drilling points. If you don't know what you're doing, you can just destroy the door.
A handyman might just take a drill and go to town on the keyhole. And yeah, they'll ruin the lock, but they often slip and gouge the door or damage the whole mechanism inside.
Whereas the manual showed it's like surgical.
It is. A pro knows on, say, a specific commercial lever lock, you drill exactly 20 millimeters up from the keyway, because that's where a specific part is. You drill one tiny hole, pop the mechanism, and the door is open. You haven't destroyed a $500 piece of hardware.
And then there's the liability. The Service Titan source talked about insurance, which I had never even thought about.
It's so important. A legitimate commercial locksmith must carry general and professional liability insurance.
Why does that matter to me as the business owner?
Okay, let's say the locksmith makes a mistake and cracks your door frame. Or worse, they short-circuit the board on your expensive access control system. If they're insured, their policy covers the damage.
But if I hire my buddy Dave, because he's $50 cheaper,
And Dave fries your system, that's on you, you're paying for it.
that's a gamble you just can't afford with your business.
And the skill gap is getting wider. Those sources from Captain Lockpick and CLK Supplies. They were talking about automotive work. I mean, it's not just twisting a key anymore.
Oh, the car stuff is insane. You're decoding transponders, cutting keys from code, using these Lishy tools or a Triton machine.
Right. A Triton machine is basically a small CNC mill. The equipment costs thousands of dollars, and the training to program a car's computer to accept a new key is highly technical.
It's really moved from a trade to a technical profession, but I want to pivot to the human side of this for a minute. We read through those 10 locksmith origin stories. It was actually pretty touching.
It wasn't just technical stuff.
Yeah, you had people who were like exterminators or inheriting a family business.
One guy was an exterminator, right, and he just wanted to change. A customer of his who was a cop showed him how to pick locks, and that's how he got started.
It just shows this is a trade of problem solvers. But more than that, locksmiths meet people on their absolute worst day.
Think about it. When are you calling a locksmith?
When my keys are locked in my running car. Or I can't open my shop and there are customers waiting outside.
Exactly. It's maximum stress. So the locksmith isn't just fixing a lock. They're de-escalating a crisis. They're giving you your life back.
And sure, this old house mentioned emergency pricing, which makes sense. But the value is that immediate access to your livelihood.
And that access doesn't always have to be destructive. We talked about drilling, but the pros try bypassing first.
The mica shim.
The mica shim, yeah. Or door spreaders. If they can slip a tool between the door and the frame and hit the latch, they've saved you the cost of a new lock.
Or the airbag method for cars. That sounds aggressive, but it's actually safer.
Much safer than a coat hanger. A pro uses a small inflatable bag, slips it in the door jamb, and pumps it up just enough to create a tiny gap. Then they use a special tool to hit the unlock button. No scratched glass, no torn weather stripping.
It's that blend of cleverness and care. And speaking of care, when you're locked out of your business at 2 a.m., you need someone who actually picks up the phone. West Point Locksmith serves all of Los Angeles, 204/7. From emergency lockouts to car key replacements, you can rely on their expertise. That number, again, is 310-295-4040.
It really all comes down to trust. You're giving someone the keys to your entire business.
So when we step back and look at this whole thing, we started with a movie trope, and we ended up with biometrics and firmware.
I think what we've seen is that a lock isn't just a piece of hardware anymore. It's a system.
A system.
Yeah, it's mechanical precision, those tight tolerances, it's systemic organization, the master key charts, and now it's digital foresight.
It's an ecosystem. You can't just focus on one part of it.
Exactly. You need the strong deadbolt to stop a kick-in, the master key system to manage your staff, and the smart lock to track the data. If one of those fails, the whole system fails.
And as we wrap up, here's something I want to leave you with. We spent all this time on 2025 trends in smart locks. We worry so much about hackers getting into our servers. But my question is, have you checked if your physical smart lock has the latest firmware update?
And, maybe even more to the point, if your digital security is military grade, but your front door has a cheap lock that can be bumped open in 10 seconds with that billiard ball trick, are you actually secure?
That is the question to think about tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. Stay safe out there.
See you next time.